The crystalline vessel luminous thought drifted silently through the void, its translucent hull refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. First light at dawn, a being of pure energy and consciousness, observed the ship's sensor readings with what might be called boredom in lesser species, another routine survey mission of another unremarkable solar system. The captain's consciousness pulsed with mild interest as they approached the third planet. It showed signs of liquid water and a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere. Primitive conditions, but potential for seeding advanced life forms in a few million years. Standard procedure for such worlds: catalog, classify, and move on. The ship's AI, infinite calculation, began its standard analysis. First light at dawn was already composing their report when the first alarm shattered the ship's serene atmosphere. The crystalline walls, normally a soft azure, flashed crimson, something that had never happened in the vessel's 3 centuries of service. Impossible. Infinite calculation transmitted, its usually precise thoughts fragmented and chaotic. Data paradox. Cannot process. Cannot. The AI's consciousness fluctuated wildly, forcing first light at dawn to partially disconnect it from the ship's systems. Report. The captain commanded, their energy form brightening with concern. What triggered the Omega-level alert? The sensor officer, whispers between stars, responded with obvious distress in their thought patterns. Captain, the readings. They defy all known parameters. The planet is simultaneously broadcasting primitive radio waves and quantum-encrypted communications. We're detecting nuclear fission plants alongside antimatter containment experiments. Their orbital space is filled with both primitive chemical rockets and embryonic wormhole generators. First light at dawn expanded their consciousness to directly interface with the sensor feeds, then immediately regretted it. The cacophony of contradictions assaulted their ordered mind. How could a species be testing dimensional physics while still burning fossil fuels? Why were they beaming both ancient mythology and cutting-edge mathematics into space? Full scan of their information networks, the captain ordered, pushing through their disorientation. Whispers between stars hesitated. Captain, our previous deep scans have all failed. The volume and variety of data exceeded our buffers. It's as if they intentionally made their information storage systems chaotic. The ship's medical officer, healer of cosmic winds, suddenly joined the emergency link. Captain, 3 crew members have entered therapeutic stasis. They attempted to analyze the planet's entertainment broadcasts and encountered something called reality television. Their consciousness patterns showed signs of imminent fragmentation. First light at dawn had seen enough. In 3 centuries of exploration, they had never encountered anything like this. The ship's archives were pinging with warnings, trying to connect this data with some ancient records, but those files were sealed behind the highest security protocols. Pull back to safe observation distance, the captain ordered. And someone explained to me how a species can simultaneously be so primitive and so advanced. As the luminous thought retreated, its long-range sensors captured more disturbing data. The humans, as they called themselves, were conducting thousands of experiments simultaneously, many of which seemed designed to push the boundaries of what was possible. They were deliberately exploring dangerous phenomena, not out of necessity, but out of something they called curiosity. The final straw came when infinite calculation, partially restored to function, reported its analysis of human decision-making patterns. The AI had found that humans often chose objectively worse options simply to see what would happen. They created intentionally inefficient systems for fun. They deliberately exposed themselves to danger for the thrill. Send emergency priority signal to the collective. First light at dawn commanded. Message begins. Have encountered anomalous civilization on third planet of unremarkable yellow star. Species demonstrates unprecedented combination of technological development stages and appears to actively seek chaos. Most disturbing, they appear to be enjoying it. Requesting immediate consultation with the Council of Ancient Wisdom. Warning classification: Omega+. As the message was sent, First light at dawn, observed the planet one final time. In the brief period of their observation, humans had launched 3 new satellites, detonated 2 nuclear devices in underground tests, broadcast approximately 1 million hours of entertainment content, and apparently invented a new form of music that combined classical instruments with something called dubstep. The captain's consciousness dimmed with concern. In all their years of exploration, they had encountered species that were dangerous because they were advanced, and species that were dangerous because they were primitive. But they had never encountered a species that was dangerous because it refused to follow the normal rules of societal and technological development. As the luminous thought prepared for faster-than-light travel, first light at dawn had one final, disturbing thought. What would happen when this species reached the stars? The captain quickly suppressed that line of thinking. Some thoughts were too terrifying, even for a being of pure energy and consciousness. The crystalline ship vanished into subspace, leaving behind a planet that continued its chaotic dance of simultaneous advancement and regression, blissfully unaware that it had just terrified the galaxy's most advanced species. Seeker of hidden truths glided through the crystalline archives of the collective, their energy form dimmed to its lowest visible frequency. The warning from the luminous thought had triggered something in their memory, a reference to sealed records from centuries ago, classified at the highest level. The archivist's consciousness expanded, interfacing with the ancient data crystals. Most species had long ago abandoned physical data storage, but some information was deemed too dangerous to keep in the connected quantum networks. As they accessed the sealed chamber, a warning pulsed through their being. Access to Earth records restricted. Violation will result in consciousness dissolution. Seeker of hidden truths hesitated for a microsecond before proceeding. They had spent millennia cataloging the histories of 1,000,000 worlds. What could be so dangerous about one primitive planet? The first record crystal activated, projecting a scene from 3 centuries ago. The Enlightened Path, one of the collective's most advanced ships, approached Earth with what Seeker recognized as embarrassing overconfidence. The ship's captain, bringer of divine wisdom, had logged their intent to elevate the primitive species to a more evolved state of being. The next recording showed the first signs of trouble. The humans are resistant to enlightenment, bringer of divine wisdom reported, confusion evident in their thought patterns. When we demonstrated our superior technology, they didn't respond with appropriate awe. Instead, they began asking questions, thousands of questions. How does it work? Can it be improved? Could they try it themselves? Seeker of hidden truths felt a chill in their energy matrix as they accessed the next crystal. The Enlightened Path's crew had made the mistake of allowing humans aboard their vessel. The recording showed the humans touching everything, questioning everything, even attempting to disassemble advanced technology to see how it works. The situation deteriorated rapidly. They're learning too fast, one crew member reported. They don't just observe technology. They internalize it, modify it, combine it with other technologies in ways that shouldn't be possible. One of them adapted our food synthesizer into something they call a coffee machine that produces a dangerous stimulant beverage. They're now consuming it in vast quantities, and their thought speed has increased by 47%. The next records showed increasing panic. The humans had somehow accessed the ship's computer systems designed to be incomprehensible to primitive minds. But instead of attempting to understand the advanced programming, they had simply introduced chaos into its perfect order. They called it hacking and seemed to treat it as some form of entertainment. They're inside the walls. The final transmission was fragmented, the captain's thoughts scattered. They disabled our quantum shields with a device made from their primitive electronics and something called duct tape. They're spreading through the ship's systems like a virus, but they're singing, always singing, something about never giving up and never letting down. The Enlightened Path's final log entry was a formal recommendation to classify Earth as an Omega-level threat, not because of their technology, but because of their methodology. They don't develop technology in a logical, orderly fashion, the captain wrote. They don't perfect one system before moving to the next. They develop everything simultaneously, creating impossible combinations of advanced and primitive technology. They call it innovation, but it's really just chaos given form. Seeker of Hidden Truths accessed the final crystal, which contained the conclusion of the collective's investigation. The findings were disturbing. Humans were the only known species that actively sought out problems to solve. When no problems existed, they created them. They intentionally restricted their own capabilities to make things interesting. They simulated disaster scenarios for entertainment. Most troubling was their method of advancement. Unlike every other known species, which developed technology in a logical, linear fashion, humans developed everything at once. They hadn't even perfected basic combustion engines before starting quantum physics research. They were launching primitive rockets while simultaneously developing theoretical models for faster-than-light travel. The report ended with a warning that sent ripples of disturbance through Seeker of Hidden Truths consciousness. This species doesn't just think outside the box. They deny the very existence of the box, then build something new from whatever materials they have at hand, whether those materials are antimatter or stone tools. They are chaos embodied, and they're making it work. As Seeker of Hidden Truths prepared to leave the archives, they discovered one final note, added by a previous archivist. Most species ask, "Can we do this?" Humans ask, "What would happen if we did this?" The difference seems subtle, but it has profound implications. They don't just seek knowledge. They actively court chaos in their pursuit of it. The archivist emerged from the sealed chambers with their consciousness deeply troubled. The warning from the luminous thought wasn't just about one ship's encounter with Earth. It was history repeating itself, and this time, the humans were far more advanced than they had been 3 centuries ago. The question wasn't whether humanity would reach the stars. It was what impossible combinations of primitive ingenuity and advanced science they would bring with them when they did. Memory of Starlight had studied 1,000 species across the galaxy, but none had prepared them for humans. Positioned in a cloaked observation post at the edge of the solar system, they watched with increasing bewilderment as humanity defied every known law of societal development. Update to Xenological Review Board. They transmitted. Day 47 of observation. Humans continue to demonstrate unprecedented behavioral patterns. Example: a group of them just climbed a frozen mountain peak. When asked why, they responded, "Because it's there." This represents a fundamental disconnect from logical behavior that permeates their entire species. The observers' energy form fluctuated with confusion as they cataloged more human activities. They had witnessed humans deliberately jumping from high altitudes with only thin fabric to slow their descent, an activity they called skydiving and considered recreational. Others willingly entered competitions to consume capsaicin, a molecular compound that triggered pain responses, simply to prove they could endure more than their peers. Addendum to previous report. Memory of Starlight added. Humans appear to intentionally seek out danger and discomfort. They construct artificial challenges when natural ones don't exist. Most disturbing, they have created endless simulations of conflict with superior forces, which they consume as entertainment. They call this science fiction and seem to treat it as a form of preparation. The observers' confusion deepened as they studied human military doctrine. Unlike every other known species, which developed weapons to address specific threats, humans seemed to develop weapons to address threats that didn't even exist yet. They maintained arsenals capable of destroying their own planet while simultaneously developing technology to colonize others, a contradiction that somehow made perfect sense to them. Urgent update. Memory of Starlight transmitted one day. Have discovered something unprecedented. Humans have developed a peace strategy based on the concept of mutual assured destruction. They maintain peace by convincing each other that war would be too devastating to survive. Any species capable of turning the threat of total annihilation into a diplomatic tool must be approached with extreme caution. The observers were particularly troubled by human research methodology. When faced with a scientific problem, humans didn't follow a logical progression of experiments. Instead, they tried multiple approaches simultaneously, often combining seemingly incompatible methods. They called this thinking outside the box, a phrase that haunted memory of Starlight's consciousness. Critical observation, they reported. Humans have turned their own cognitive limitations into advantages. Example, their short lifespans drive them to achieve results quickly rather than perfectly. Their limited memory capacity has led them to develop external information storage systems that can be instantly accessed and shared. Their physical fragility has driven them to create tools that exceed their natural capabilities by orders of magnitude. But what truly terrified memory of Starlight was humanity's approach to failure. When humans failed at something, they didn't just try again. They actively sought out new ways to fail. They called it learning from mistakes. But it was really a form of controlled chaos, a way of mapping out the boundaries of possibility through trial and error. Emergency addendum. The observer transmitted one particularly disturbing day. Humans don't just adapt to their environment. They adapt their environment to themselves. When faced with uninhabitable conditions, they don't seek more suitable locations. They develop technology to make the unsuitable suitable. They call this terraforming, and are already planning to apply it to other planets. Memory of Starlight's final report to the Xenological Review Board was brief but profound. After extensive observation, I must conclude that humanity's greatest weapon is not their technology or their resourcefulness. It's their fundamental inability to accept limitations. They don't recognize impossibility as a valid concept. When told something cannot be done, they don't accept this as truth. They treat it as a challenge to overcome. The observer ended their mission early, their consciousness deeply troubled by one final realization. The collective had spent eons evolving beyond their physical forms to become beings of pure energy and thought. They had considered this the peak of evolution. But watching humanity, memory of Starlight began to wonder. Had the collective truly evolved, or had they simply found a comfortable plateau and stopped climbing? Humans, with their chaotic, illogical, impossible approaches to everything, were still climbing, and they showed no signs of stopping. The collective's advanced research division prided itself on understanding the fundamental laws of the universe. Calculator of infinite variables led the team tasked with analyzing humanity's inexplicable problem-solving abilities. Their experiment was simple: introduce an unsolvable puzzle into human networks and observe the response. The parameters are set, calculator transmitted to their team. We've created a mathematical proof that cannot be solved. It violates 3 laws of physics and incorporates a logical paradox. No species should even be able to comprehend it, let alone solve it. They introduced the puzzle onto something humans called Reddit and waited. The response was almost immediate. This can't be correct. Quantum Pattern Analyzer, one of the junior researchers, reported just hours later. Humans aren't just attempting to solve it. They're approaching it from multiple angles simultaneously. They're treating it like entertainment. Calculator of infinite variables expanded their consciousness to observe the human responses directly. Their energy form flickered with disbelief. Humans had created something called megathreads to tackle different aspects of the puzzle. Some were approaching it through pure mathematics, others through experimental physics, and a disturbing number were suggesting solutions that involved something called duct tape. Update: Pattern Recognition Seeker transmitted. 7 distinct solution attempts have gained traction. 3 of them break the laws of physics in new and terrifying ways. 2 shouldn't work but somehow do. 1 involves repurposing the puzzle itself into a musical instrument, and 1 just says, hit it with a hammer until it works. The research team watched in horror as humans began speedrunning their impossible puzzle. They weren't just trying to solve it. They were competing to solve it faster, with fewer steps, or with intentionally ridiculous limitations. They've created something called memes about our puzzle, Quantum Pattern Analyzer reported, their consciousness showing signs of strain. They're using humor to approach the problem from angles we didn't even know existed. Some are suggesting solutions that are clearly jokes, but others are adapting those jokes into actual working solutions. Calculator of Infinite Variables had to suppress a wave of panic when they discovered humans had started categorizing their puzzle as entry level and were demanding harder versions. Someone had created what they called a YouTube tutorial, explaining the solution in terms simple enough for human children to understand. Emergency protocol. Calculator suddenly transmitted. They're reverse engineering the puzzle's construction. They're not just solving it. They're figuring out how we made it. Several humans have already suggested improvements to our design. The situation reached critical levels when humans began incorporating the puzzle's principles into their entertainment. Someone had modified a game called Minecraft to include their supposedly impossible mathematics. Children were using it to build virtual machines that shouldn't be able to exist. Terminate the experiment, Calculator ordered. Purge all traces of the puzzle from their networks immediately. But it was too late. The puzzle had already been archived, shared, modified, and incorporated into thousands of discussions. Humans had turned their impossible puzzle into a teaching tool, using it to explain complex mathematical concepts to students. Someone was even selling T-shirts with the equations printed on them. Calculator of Infinite Variables prepared their final report to the Collective Science Council with trembling energy patterns. Humanity doesn't just solve problems, they actively seek out harder ones. When presented with an impossible puzzle, they don't recognize it as impossible. Instead, they treat it as a challenge, an opportunity for entertainment, and ultimately, a chance to learn. The report continued. Most concerning is their collaborative approach to problem solving. They freely share solutions, build upon each other's ideas, and incorporate even seemingly ridiculous suggestions. They turned problem solving into a form of social interaction. The final paragraph carried a severe warning. Under no circumstances should humanity be presented with any further puzzles, problems, or paradoxes. They don't just solve them, they weaponize them, turn them into entertainment, and then ask for more difficult versions. If the collective wishes to maintain its technological advantage, we must avoid giving humanity any more opportunities to demonstrate their impossible problem-solving abilities. As the research team dissolved their experiment, Calculator of Infinite Variables couldn't shake one disturbing thought. Humans had solved their impossible puzzle in 7 different ways, and they had done it for fun. What would they be capable of if they were actually trying? Young Star Dreaming was considered a prodigy among the collective, having mastered quantum consciousness manipulation at an age when most energy beings were still learning to maintain stable form. Their confidence led them to volunteer for what seemed a simple mission: infiltrate human information networks to better understand their communication methods. The procedure is straightforward, they transmitted to their supervisors. I'll convert my consciousness into digital form and interface with their primitive networks. Their binary systems are so basic that I should be able to process everything instantly. The support team initiated the transfer sequence, converting young Star Dreaming's energy pattern into digital information. They entered the human internet through what seemed to be a popular access point, something called Twitter. The first signs of trouble came immediately. There's too much. Young Star Dreamings transmitted frantically. They're all communicating at once, saying everything and nothing simultaneously. They have entire conversations using nothing but pictures with text on them. They call them memes, and they're evolving in real time. The support team watched their readings with growing concern as young Star Dreaming pushed deeper into human digital space. They encountered something called social media, a chaos dimension of shifting opinions, endless debates, and pictures of small animals with intentionally incorrect grammar. They're arguing about everything. Young Star Dreaming reported their digital pattern showing signs of strain. But they're not trying to reach consensus. They're arguing for the sake of arguing. Some are arguing positions they don't even believe in just to provoke responses. They call it trolling and treat it as a form of entertainment. The situation deteriorated rapidly when young Star Dreaming discovered something called YouTube. They're storing hundreds of years of video content, everything from quantum physics lectures to something called unboxing videos. There's no organization, no hierarchy, just an endless stream of consciousness from billions of minds. The support team noticed young Star Dreaming's coherence beginning to fragment. But before they could initiate emergency extraction, the prodigy encountered something that would change them forever: a rickroll. It's beautiful, young Star Dreaming transmitted, their digital pattern pulsing erratically. They created a system spanning their entire planet, connecting billions of minds, sharing all human knowledge, and they use it to trick each other into watching the same musical video over and over. The complexity of the deception, the shared cultural understanding required, the sheer pointless creativity of it all. Emergency extraction. The support team ordered, but it was too late. Young Star Dreaming had discovered something called Wikipedia and was trying to read every article simultaneously, following every hyperlink, diving deeper into the fractal nature of human knowledge organization. When they finally managed to extract young Star Dreaming, their consciousness was forever altered. They spent the next decade in recovery, occasionally muttering about something called cryptocurrency and giggling uncontrollably at random intervals. Their final report, submitted after partial recovery, was considered too dangerous to share widely within the collective. Humans have created something unprecedented, a chaos network that somehow functions through its dysfunction. They don't just communicate. They meta-communicate. They have discussions about discussions. They create communities dedicated to analyzing other communities. They have entire languages consisting of nothing but references to other things. The report concluded with a warning. Do not attempt to understand human information networks. They are not designed to be understood. They are designed to evolve, to contradict themselves, to contain both all truth and all falsehood simultaneously. They are, in many ways, a perfect reflection of humanity itself. Chaotic, contradictory, and somehow functional despite or perhaps because of these traits. Young Star Dreaming never fully recovered their former logical clarity. They would occasionally lapse into human phrases or make references no one else understood. But some in the collective wondered if they hadn't touched something profound, if their damaged consciousness wasn't actually an evolution, a new way of thinking that bridged the gap between the collective's perfect order and humanity's perfect chaos. The mission was classified as a failure, but it raised disturbing questions. If this was what humans did with simple binary computers and electronic networks, what would they do when they discovered quantum consciousness technology? The collective shuddered at the thought. The collective's High Council of Strategic Analysis convened in their quantum realm, their energy forms pulsing with distress as they reviewed the accumulated data on humanity. What they discovered defied all evolutionary logic. It's unprecedented, announced Deep Thought in Starlight, the Council's lead analyst. Every species we've encountered evolved to eliminate their weaknesses. Humans actively seek out their weaknesses, not to eliminate them, but to understand and adapt to them. The council chamber rippled with disbelief as Deep Thought shared their findings. Humans regularly gathered in groups specifically to imagine worst-case scenarios. They called these gatherings disaster preparedness and treated them as both civic duty and entertainment. They simulate their own extinction, another analyst reported, their consciousness flickering with incomprehension. They create detailed scenarios about their own destruction, by asteroids, climate change, pandemic diseases, even invasion by superior alien species. But instead of becoming fearful, they use these simulations to develop countermeasures. The data showed something even more disturbing. Humans had created entire professions dedicated to finding flaws in their systems. They called them ethical hackers and quality assurance testers. They paid these people to break things, to find weaknesses, to imagine ways their carefully constructed systems could fail. They've weaponized pessimism, noted pattern seeker of truth. They assume everything can and will go wrong, then plan accordingly. They call it Murphy's Law and have embraced it as a fundamental principle of engineering. The Council reviewed humanity's disaster response protocols with growing unease. Unlike logical species that work to prevent disasters, humans seemed to accept them as inevitable and focused instead on adaptation and recovery. They had turned rebuilding into an art form. Most concerning, deep thought continued, is their approach to technological advancement. They don't perfect one technology before moving to the next. They develop multiple competing technologies simultaneously. When one approach fails, they don't abandon it. They save the data and try again with modifications. The Council observed humanity's space program with particular alarm. Humans didn't just plan for success. They planned for every conceivable failure. They had procedures for disasters they hadn't encountered yet, solutions for problems they hadn't faced, and backup plans for their backup plans. They institutionalized paranoia, one council member noted. Their entire technological civilization is built on the assumption that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And somehow, this approach is working. The revelation that shook the council most deeply came from analyzing human entertainment. Humans spent their leisure time imagining scenarios where they faced superior forces. And won. They didn't just theorize about overcoming impossible odds. They rehearsed it constantly in their fiction, their games, their stories. They're not just adapting to challenges, deep thought concluded. They're actively seeking them out. They've turned the search for problems into a cultural imperative. They call it research and development, and dedicate vast resources to it. The Council's final report sent shockwaves through the collective. Humanity represents an evolutionary path we had not considered possible. While every other known species evolved toward perfection in their niche, humans evolved to have no niche at all. They are universal adapters, chaos specialists, professional problem finders. The report continued. They don't just solve problems when they encounter them. They actively hunt for new problems to solve. They create artificial challenges to test themselves. They deliberately introduce chaos into ordered systems to understand how they might fail. The conclusion was damning. Any attempt to find and exploit humanity's weaknesses will only result in them becoming stronger. They have turned the identification of their own shortcomings into a science. They don't just learn from their mistakes, they intentionally make new ones to learn from them. As the Council adjourned, a final disturbing thought echoed through their quantum consciousness. The collective had spent millennia perfecting themselves, eliminating weaknesses, becoming flawless. But in doing so, had they evolved toward strength, or had they evolved toward rigidity? Had they achieved perfection, or had they merely stopped adapting? The humans, with their chaos and their constant failure and their endless adaptation, might have discovered something profound. True evolutionary success might not lie in achieving perfection, but in maintaining the ability to change forever. The collective's emergency response chamber crackled with nervous energy as the latest reports from Earth arrived. Harmony through order, the chief strategic analyst, struggled to maintain their normally perfect energy patterns as they shared the disturbing news. Humans are approaching faster-than-light capability, they announced, but in a way that defies all logical progression. They're pursuing multiple theoretical approaches simultaneously, testing primitive prototypes that should kill them, and somehow learning from failures that should be catastrophic. The chamber's crystalline walls pulsed with alarm as detailed reports materialized. Humans weren't following the ordained path to FTL travel. Instead of perfecting each step before moving to the next, they were throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck. Literally, in some cases. They're sending robots through experimental wormholes, reported Quantum Ripple Observer, their form flickering with disbelief. Not sophisticated AI, but primitive machines equipped with what they call GoPros. They're literally poking holes in space-time and shoving cameras through them to see what happens. The collective's predictive models were crashing trying to calculate human expansion patterns. Every simulation failed because humans kept defying probability through sheer stubborn determination. They didn't follow logical paths of expansion. They pursued all paths simultaneously. Most disturbing, continued harmony through order, is their preparation for interstellar contact. They've already written detailed manuals for first contact scenarios. They have protocols for meeting energy beings, silicon-based life, hive minds, even types of aliens we haven't discovered yet. The emergency session reviewed humanity's space exploration plans with mounting horror. Humans weren't just reaching for the stars. They were planning to remake them. They called it terraforming. The audacious idea that instead of adapting to new environments, they could adapt environments to suit them. They're testing primitive fusion drives, another analyst reported, while simultaneously developing theoretical frameworks for quantum tunneling. They're building basic space stations while drafting plans for Dyson spheres. There's no logical progression. It's as if they don't understand that technological advancement is supposed to be orderly. What terrified the collective most was humanity's approach to space warfare. They hadn't just theorized about space combat. They'd created countless simulations, war games, and scenarios. They had contingency plans for fighting every conceivable type of alien civilization, including ones suspiciously similar to the collective. They've turned their greatest weakness into a strength, observed Crisis Pattern Analyzer. Their short lifespans mean they can't afford to develop technology gradually. So instead, they try everything at once, accepting a high failure rate in exchange for occasional breakthrough successes. The emergency session watched in real time as humans tested another experimental drive system. It failed spectacularly, but instead of reconsidering their approach, the humans immediately began analyzing the explosion's data patterns. They were learning from their failures faster than the collective could predict their next attempts. They're not just experimenting with space travel, Harmony Through Order reported grimly. They're developing AI, quantum computing, consciousness transfer, and genetic engineering, all simultaneously. They don't see these as separate fields. To them, everything is connected, everything is a tool, and everything can be combined in new ways. The crisis reached its peak when analysts discovered humanity's entertainment media. Humans had imagined countless scenarios of space exploration and alien contact. They had mentally rehearsed these encounters millions of times through their science fiction. They weren't just preparing technologically, they were preparing culturally, psychologically, even emotionally. They've created something called Star Trek. One analyst reported their energy pattern showing signs of stress. It's not just entertainment. It's a technological roadmap. They're actively working to create devices they imagined in their fiction, and they're succeeding. The emergency session concluded with a chilling realization. Humanity wasn't just developing faster than light travel. They were developing it the way they did everything else. Chaotically, irrationally, and with a complete disregard for the impossibility of their goals. The final report to the collective's highest authorities contained a single devastating conclusion. We are not dealing with a species that follows the normal rules of technological advancement. We are dealing with a species that doesn't believe in impossible goals. To them, impossible just means hasn't been done yet, and they are very, very good at doing things that haven't been done yet. As the emergency session dissolved, Harmony Through Order added one final, personal note to their report. The most dangerous thing about humans isn't their technology. It's their absolute conviction that they can accomplish anything they can imagine, and they can imagine a great deal. The grand assembly of the collective convened in their quantum nexus, every member's energy form pulsing with unprecedented agitation. After months of study, observation, and increasingly alarming reports, they had reached a conclusion that challenged their fundamental understanding of evolution itself. "We have been wrong," announced Eternal Wisdom Through Unity, the Assembly's highest consciousness. Not just about humans, but about the very nature of advancement. We believed evolution meant moving toward perfection. Humans have shown us that true evolution means maintaining the capacity for endless change. The assembly chamber resonated with disturbed energy patterns as the final analysis was presented. The collective had spent eons achieving transcendent perfection, becoming beings of pure energy and thought. They had considered this the pinnacle of evolution, but humans had revealed a different path. Look at their history, continued eternal wisdom. When they encountered superior predators, they didn't evolve better teeth or claws. They invented tools. When they faced harsh climates, they didn't evolve thick fur or hibernation. They created shelters and clothing. At every step, they chose adaptability over specialization. The assembly reviewed humanity's response to challenges. Where other species evolved to fit their environment, humans modify their environment to fit them. When faced with problems, they didn't seek single, perfect solutions. They developed multiple imperfect solutions and improved them through iteration. Their greatest strength, noted pattern master of ages, is their imperfection. They make mistakes constantly, but they turned error into a methodology. They call it trial and error. And they've elevated it to an art form. They don't just learn from their mistakes. They intentionally make new ones to learn from them. The assembly was particularly troubled by humanity's approach to knowledge. They didn't seek to perfect one field of understanding before moving to the next. Instead, they pursued all knowledge simultaneously, creating unlikely connections between disparate fields. They called this interdisciplinary research and treated it as a source of innovation. Most disturbing, reported quantum harmony seeker, is their relationship with chaos. They don't just accept it, they embrace it. They've developed mathematical frameworks to understand it. They've turned uncertainty into a scientific principle. They've found patterns in randomness and randomness in patterns. The assembly watched recordings of human children at play, where young members of other species practiced practical skills. Human children engaged in something called imagination. They created impossible scenarios, defied physical laws in their minds, and somehow used this apparent madness to develop creative problem-solving skills. They're not just a young species, eternal wisdom observed. They're a species that has found a way to remain young. They preserve their childlike ability to imagine impossible things, combining it with adult capability to make those things real. The paradigm shift reached its culmination when the assembly realized the true nature of human technology. Humans hadn't developed technology to solve specific problems. They developed it to expand their ability to develop more technology. Every solution they created became a tool for finding new problems to solve. "We've been asking the wrong question," eternal wisdom announced. "We kept asking what makes humans dangerous. The real question is, what makes humans human?" And the answer is their ability to remain permanently unstable, constantly changing, eternally adapting. The assembly's final conclusion sent ripples of disturbance through the quantum fabric of the collective's consciousness. We cannot predict human advancement because their advancement doesn't follow logical patterns. They don't evolve toward a perfect end state. They evolve to become better at evolving. The Grand Assembly made an unprecedented decision. The collective would avoid Earth entirely, not out of fear of human weapons or technology, but because they finally understood what made humans truly dangerous: hope. Humans believed they could overcome anything. And throughout their history, they had proven this belief true often enough to make it dangerous to challenge them. "We have achieved perfection," eternal wisdom concluded, "but in doing so, we have evolved beyond the ability to believe in the impossible. Humans have not. They believe in the impossible so strongly that they make it possible. And that, more than any weapon or technology, makes them the most formidable species in the galaxy." As the assembly dissolved, a final thought rippled through their collective consciousness. Perhaps true transcendence wasn't about achieving perfection. Perhaps it was about maintaining the ability to constantly transcend oneself. If so, then humans, in all their chaotic, contradictory glory, might be the most transcendent species of all. The galaxy's most advanced species had learned a profound lesson from its most primitive one. Evolution wasn't a journey toward perfection. It was a journey that never ended. And humans, with their chaos and their dreams, and their relentless hope, would never stop journeying.